Okay, so we're back with our little creature that we've put together here in all his tentacle glory. This is the Dynamesh sculpt after it was finished from the last video, and there you can see what that looks like in the wireframe. But that guy is at 1.3 million polys. So the next thing that we need to do, some of this I've already done, but I'm going to recap it. The next thing we need to do is get a topology together for this, then UVs, and then we're going to be on to texturing it. So what I will do to get the topology built for this, I'm going to go through the steps and show you, even though I've already done it, and I already have a finished copy waiting. What I'll do is make a duplicate of this subtool, then we'll go into Decimation Master. I'm going to pre-process the current mesh, so we'll just give that a second. So it's analyzing, and once that's finished analyzing, then we're going to decimate this mesh down to around 40,000 polys. Which is still chugging on that. We'll decimate this down to around 40,000. And then we're going to cut it down the center, so we're only working with half of it. The reason for that will be because when we're going to Z-remesh it, and when you Z-remesh it, if you have cut it in half, then you're more likely to get a smooth center line that you can then mirror across and have a guaranteed edge loop running down the length of it. So let's go ahead and turn on our wireframe. And you can see I've already got my decimation set to 4%. So if I hit decimate current, you're going to see that brings us down to 52,000 polys. Let's change what material we're looking at this with. I'm still using this kind of luminous subsurface material that I like, but we change to skin shade or a blend, then you can see the wireframe a little more clearly. Let's take this on down to 3%. And there you see we come in at 39,000, which is right inside the threshold of what we want. So the next thing that I did was to go into my geometry tab, go into modify geometry, and delete by symmetry. Turn off symmetry, which under transform you can find that here, where you just hit X on your keyboard. Then I'll go into Z-remesher, and I'm going to turn off adaptive. I'm going to set my target poly count to 20. That's going to be multiples of 1,000, so that's 20,000. Then if I hold Alt and click on Z-remesher, that will call up a different algorithm for Z-remesher than it would if you would just hit the button. So there's two different ways that it calculates things. And there you can see pretty decent topology that's created from that. Now, I didn't separate the barbs and skeletal section off here in the example, which I did in the final piece I'm going to show you. I was just going ahead and running that so you can see this happen. From there, the next thing I would do is mirror the mesh with Mirin Weld, and then go down through the center looking for anything like this, these diamonds that happen where there's a try, and I would use the Z-modeler, excuse me, to delete edges, delete faces, and just clean up the topology a little bit to make sure that I have a good clean center line running down that. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the finished topology so you can see what that looks like. So here you can see we're at 40,225, and nice clean topology, good center line. Now the colors that you see here, these are the poly groups that I've made, and that has to do with the process of doing UVs on this, which is the next thing that we need to go over. What I'll do is go through that topology and select polygons and group them in such a way as to create groups that correspond to the way I want my UV shells to be broken up. One of the big things to keep in mind with that is where we have all these tentacles and pieces that come out from this central source. You want to make sure that you have that you don't have a loop, closed loop running around those if you're going to use UV Master, because UV Master can a lot of times create some really weird things, like where this loop should continue on around here. If we had that all as that polygroup, UV Master would try to calculate that and create UVs for that circular area, and a lot of times it will collapse those in and create some just really weird looking patterns out of that. So you want to make sure that you have it separated so you don't have closed loops. Then we'll go into UV Master and we'll turn on Symmetry and Polygroups. That way it will create UV shells for each polygroup. So here is where I've already done this. Okay, and if we flatten this, you can see what my UVs look like. Now, this is after I've also done some extra cleanup. If we just run this using UV Master, the shells will be nice and clean. The UVs will be clean, but their layout may be really bizarre looking. You probably won't be able to tell what's what in the placement and rotation of the shells. So here you can see where I've gone in and cleaned up the rotation and placement of the shells and just created a UV layout that makes a little more sense to look at. So that, let's say down the road I need to edit something in Photoshop, an image that goes on the sky. This way I'll be able to look at the UV shells and just make more sense of what my maps look like. So I'm going to unflatten that, switch back over to our finished topology, go to my standard brush, turn off my polyframe, and I'm going to increase my subdivision up, and you'll see here I'm at 5 subdivision levels. That's going to bring our model to 10.1 million polygons, and I've already flooded it and done some poly painting on it to start establishing some different patterns and just different flesh types, and really building kind of an artistic scheme that I want to use across the model. So the way that I've gone about that has been primarily using Spotlight and using reference images pulled from various sources. Primarily, though, I'll go to Google, and in my settings, I'll look for images that are open for use, that are public domain or whatever. And for this guy, I've pulled from different cephalopods, prawns, shrimp, different types of aquatic life, and compiled just a nice little library of images of those. And here you can see where I've imported those into my texture tab. And then if we turn on Spotlight, you can see where I have them all. All the ones that I want to use right now are just waiting here for me to use to project paint through from them. So if we look, you can see that I've used, for instance, the elements from this lobster throughout the belly and the underside of the tentacles. This guy right here, his patterns along his back were a really good source for some of the ideas I had to go along the top. And then I'm working with this little prawn right here, this little shrimpy guy, as a source for some more color, some more texture and variation. So what we'll do with that, I will zoom in on this. It's a nice high-res image, so I'll zoom in on that as far as I can before it starts losing details. Well, the hotspot that's on there is kind of a problem. But there's a quick way inside ZBrush that you can fix that. Let's say we wanted to get rid of that hotspot. We could click on Clone right here. Let's turn off Z-Add. And then wherever my spotlight is on my image will be my clone source. So now I can paint that clone source over that little segment of the image. and it's just like cloning out bits of a photo in Photoshop. So if we wanted to actually take this textural component right here and run that through other parts of the image just so we'd have a larger area to sample from, we could totally do that just by moving our spotlight. And then let's see, come over here and paint a little. I just paint right up to where it sort of meets. We can blend that in. And so this is a great technique from inside Spotlight for taking a bit of a photo and turning it into a much larger texture resource for while you're painting. Let's bring the brush size down a bit. So this way, instead of having this white table that looks like this thing's sitting on, having that out there and accidentally painting over into that or painting with that, from time to time, we'll end up having just nothing but this nice texture here to work with throughout. It's also kind of a neat technique because you can go through and just end up painting really interesting patterns out of it that are very organic and they're pulled from a natural source, but they can end up creating patterns that will work well on an imaginative sort of creature. So I find things like that are really handy when you're doing completely fabricated, non-real, unrealistic fictional creatures. It's nice to have these methods that will let you kind of find your way into patterns and textures that feel believable and natural but are completely fabricated. So I'm just going to keep doing that for a moment, and we'll keep that process going so we have the largest area to work with that we can get. Maybe sample some of this tail. Pull this stuff over. Let's make this a little smaller. And here you can see where we're starting to go with this. Let's go through here and maybe just kind of work out some of that hot spot. It's not a bad thing to sometimes keep some of that, but it can end up, it depends on what you want. If you're trying to create some forced lighting on a model, then having that stuff there can be helpful. But I really don't want to do that with this one. So I'm going to leave some of the smaller bits of highlighting that has, but generally I'm going to paint out most of that. It's really important, I think, to pay attention to your own prep work with images and things that you're going to use, because preparing an image, that's really, when you're preparing an image like this that you're going to use, if you don't, it really depends on what you want to do. If you don't bother with this stuff, then you can still use it, and I do. I mean, sometimes I'll step in and start working and just start flying with things so fast that I might not take the time to flesh it out like this, or to to clean up an image, or to create the kind of resource that I'm creating from this. But typically I find that if I do take that time, I'm glad that I did. Because I end up generating patterns that are really useful and creating something that's a much more useful resource for while I'm working. So there, we've painted out highlights and we've duplicated, so now we've just got this gigantic resource. and we can pull all kinds of things out of this. So we come back in here, set my spotlight pin, turn my opacity down on it, and now we're ready to go paint. Turn my Z add back on just a little tiny bit. Turn my RGB value back up. Now, of course, if we were to come out here and scale that image down, we're going to be condensing a lot of textural data, which can help us create the impression of much tighter, smaller sorts of details. I'm going to turn my RGB intensity down a bit. I really want to use this predominantly fleshy brown tone that comes out of this to bridge the gap between the greens and yellows at the top and that fleshy red in the bottom. So just occasionally pop into the spotlight and turn the image so that we can get a little more variation out of it. As far as texturing goes, what I'm doing right here is really just blocking, but instead of blocking with color, I'm blocking with texture pulled from photo sources. So sometimes it's a good idea to do your blocking with color and establish a color scheme, but this time I'm just going to fly kind of by the seat of my pants, which can be fun with the whole photo texture deal, and see where that ends up. Either way, I mean, really at the end of it, you're still working with color. You're still building a color palette in what you do with it, and that's kind of the important thing to keep in mind. But in working with it this way, you're able to use some photo elements, elements for your textures that'll help push you a little further along than just establishing straight color scheme. Now, also, this isn't for a client, and most of the time for clients, I'll establish color scheme, and and if I'll ask them up front, if they would like to have that sort of thing presented to them before work's completed, and so on. Some do, some don't. Some folks, some clients are really easygoing about that stuff, and they're like, no, they'll just have you work to whatever kind of textures seem appropriate for a creature. And then others, may have a really specific color palette in mind for a project, and when they do, you want to make sure that you're kind of mentally prepared for that, and that you've already got your head in the right place to be able to do those kind of designs and present that. So, but since this is an internal creature, this is something we'll probably release as a product in the 3D content markets. I'm kind of my own client here, so I don't really have to present it for anyone's approval. So there. That's kind of one of the beauties of that world as an artist is the content market does allow a lot of cool imaginative sort of things like this for folks like us. I mean, we can just create really interesting ideas and put them out there, and people can use them, play with them, and have some fun with it. But then we get to be, get to have a degree of creative freedom that a lot of other jobs in the 3D sector don't really offer. It has its drawbacks too, but that's probably one of the most rewarding parts of it, is you really just are free to kind of cut loose and have some fun. So there you can see I've pretty much established all of the textural components of this guy's design. I've got quite a bit more work to do, so it's really beyond the scope of just a single video. But I wanted to make sure that I came back in and did another presentation on this guy, just showing some of the techniques, some of the uses of Spotlight and ZBrush, pulling photo textures in, so on and so forth, things like that. And I just kind of give you a little bit of insight into the process that we use here at 6S1 for doing creatures for our projects and for our own products and things. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed the video, and there should be another one coming. I think when I'm finished with this guy, I'm going to finish out all the details, all the final sculpt, get him ready for some nice high quality rendering, and then come back then with another video that kind of shows you the stopping point. It shows you where this guy ends up, and who knows, maybe by that point he'll actually be rigged and you can see him moving around. So anyway, until then, I'm Les for 6S1 Media. Don't forget to come check us out. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, 6S1 Media, 6S1 Media on Facebook and on Twitter, and follow us in those various places. You'll hopefully see a lot of cool stuff, some things that you like. If you're into 3D content, don't forget to come look us up at Renderosity, where we sell quite a bit of stuff. And until next time, keep making art. So thanks.